BC NDP's climate retreat under fire. Former allies condemn the abandonment of climate commitments as wildfires rage across the province. Amid an unprecedented wildfire season that has forced thousands to evacuate and blanketed British Columbia in hazardous smoke, a coalition of former New Democratic Party MPs, MLA, Indigenous leaders, and community figures has issued an open letter to Premier David Eby and the BC NDP caucus, demanding a renewed dedication to climate action.
The signatories expressed deep disappointment that the government has retreated from its earlier ambitious climate programme, framing this backsliding as a betrayal of both environmental and social equity promises. The letter's authors underscored that runaway climate change represents the ultimate threat to a fair and equal future, directly linking the intensifying wildfire crisis to the province's continued reliance on fossil fuel infrastructure such as LNG terminals and pipelines.
This intervention signals a critical fracture within the NDP's traditional base, forcing a reckoning between short-term political expediency and long-term planetary survival.
From leadership to backtracking, the swift erosion of BC's climate ambition reflects deeper tensions between economic development and ecological imperatives. The BC NDP, under former Premier John Horgan, once positioned itself as a Canadian climate leader by enacting a Clean BC strategy that aimed for net zero emissions by 2050 and committing to reduce emissions from the oil and gas sector.
However, subsequent decisions, including the approval of expanded LNG exports, support for the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and a retreat from aggressive carbon pricing, have effectively gutted this legacy. The current crisis is not merely a policy shift, but a structural conflict. The government is caught between the fiscal promises of resource extraction and the accelerating physical impacts of climate change, as evidenced by a wildfire season that has already burned over 1.5 million hectares in 2024.
Indigenous leaders who were instrumental in the initial climate framework through co-governance agreements now find their trust betrayed as the same projects they opposed continue to gain provincial backing. This discord undermines the NDP's core narrative of progressive governance and exposes a credibility gap that could reshape the province's political landscape.
Fracturing the progressive coalition, the open letter exposes a strategic schism between the NDP's grassroots climate advocates and its corporatist energy policy wing. At the heart of this confrontation lies a sophisticated power dynamic. Former NDP stalwarts, including ex-MPs and MLAs who once championed the party's environmental platform, are now leveraging their moral authority to challenge the current government's trajectory.
These signatories represent a critical electoral bloc, progressive voters who delivered key ridings in urban centres like Vancouver and Victoria, as well as Indigenous communities exerting free, prior, and informed consent over land use. The letter's timing is strategic, coinciding with the heat of wildfire season to maximise political pressure.
Meanwhile, the BC NDP faces an opposing force from labour unions and resource sector allies who argue that LNG and pipeline jobs are essential for economic reconciliation and rural stability. This dual pressure creates a policy paralysis. Any decisive climate action risks alienating a portion of the NDP's broad coalition, while inaction corrodes its foundational identity.
The open letter thus serves as a warning that the party's base will not passively accept a slide toward a carbon-intensive status quo, and that electoral consequences may follow.
A strategist's verdict: recommit or risk irrelevance. The government's response to this intervention will determine whether BC remains a climate pioneer or becomes a cautionary tale of compromised ambition. The immediate projection is that the BC NDP will likely issue a tepid reaffirmation of its climate targets, possibly accompanied by new funding for wildfire prevention or adaptation measures, but without fundamentally altering its pipeline and LNG stance.
This approach, however, only defers a deeper confrontation. The open letter's signatories, representing a network of trusted progressive voices, possess the ability to mobilise public opinion and swing voters in the next provincial election.
If the government fails to deliver a credible green policy reset such as an accelerated phase-out of fossil fuel subsidies, a moratorium on new LNG projects, or a just transition framework, it risks alienating its core base and losing ground to the Greens on the left. Conversely, a bold recommitment to decarbonisation could reinvigorate the NDP's mandate, but would require confronting powerful economic interests.
The coming months will test whether strategic necessity finally overrides institutional inertia, with the wildfires themselves serving as the starkest data point yet that half measures are no longer tenable.